Bună ziua și bine v-am găsit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Academia de Sănătate. Astăzi avem onoarea deosebită de a-l avea ca interlocutor pe profesorul Francis Delmonico de la Boston din Statele Unite. Am să încep cu prezentarea pe scurt a profesorului Delmonico și e suficient să prezint titlurile pe care le-a deținut sau le deține. Profesorul Delmonico este profesor de chirurgie la Harvard Medical School din Boston și funcționează la faimosul spital Massachusetts Boston. La nivel internațional este președintele unei comisii, task force, se cheamă, a Organizației Mondiale a Sănătății, dedicată transplantului de organe și țesuturi, deci Chair of WHO Task Force of Organ and Transplantation. În același timp este Chief Medical Officer, deci șeful băncii de organe din New England, deci din regiunea de care aparține orașul. Este membru al Academiei Pontificale din Roma, evident, pe lângă Sfântul Scaun, și este chiar membru al Consiliului de Conducere al acestei academii. Este fost președinte al Agenției de Transplant la nivel internațional. Iată, deci, aceste numeroase titluri pe care le-a deținut sau le deține profesorul Delmonico conturează una din marile personalități ale transplantului în momentul de față, ale cărui sarcini, după cum ați remarcat, sunt icane de transplant, cunoscută sub numele de UNOS, și este de asemenea fost președinte al TTS, The Transplantation Society, cea mai importantă, în primul rând, poate, legate de organizarea sistemelor de transplant în diverse țări ale lumii și de supervizarea a ceea ce se întâmplă la nivel mondial în transplant din punct de vedere al principiilor etice, din punct de vedere al numărului de operații de transplant, a rezultatelor acestora. Consider că este poate una dintre cele mai importante emisiuni pe care le facem aici la Academia de Sănătate pe tema transplantului de organe și eficienței transplantului ca metodă terapeutică. De aici încolo am să încep conversația cu profesorul Delmonico în limba engleză. Hi Frank, thank you very much for accepting the invitation.
Yes, thank you.
Again, I introduce you to the Romanian world audience, and I mention your titles. And also I mentioned that you know for quite a while, I would say, what does it mean, organ transplantation in this part of the world, in this area. You visited Romania several times. This is going to be an important discussion about organ transplantation, organ and tissue transplantation. Well, realities of Romanian transplantation. So therefore, in this discussion, I would like to focus on these realities, and I would like to be a very honest conversation and very open and transparent, because lately there are some problems here, and because of these problems, the number of transplants decrease, I would say dramatically. With the consequences that are, well, very easy to guess. Well, more mortality, the increased mortality on the waiting list, and, well, people getting an organ may be in a worse condition because of this. You know very well what does it mean, such a dramatic level today. And some of the remedies, some of the solutions, you think we should national program of transplantation. So now we try to recover, and the idea is that first of all to have such a very honest and open discussion we should apply in our national program of transplantation. So again, what would you suggest in such a situation? The more transparent such a discussion is, probably the more beneficial would be. We want from you, well, an opinion which is probably at the highest level, how could we recover? How could we come back first to the previous number and then to increase to the expected number? Romania is expected to have around 400 patients when the number roughly actually is half of the number of the 2013-2014, the best year in Romania for the organ transplantation, donors per year. In 2013-2014, managed to have 150, and now we have about 60.
So, you know, I think you've struck exactly on the way of conducting our conversation. First, you have placed before the Romanian people the problem. Romanians are being disadvantaged in the opportunity of undergoing organ transplantation because there is an inadequate number of deceased donors available to provide organs, and the inadequacy is substantiated by data. Now, do you wish me to pause and for you to make the translation? It's an inadequate number, and we know of this by our experience, having visited Romania, as you mentioned, several times and in several locations, that there was an opportunity of more donors, but there's been a dramatic reduction that is unacceptable to you and to the colleagues and to the agency and should be to the government. So we know of the problem, and how do you wish to proceed?
No, we will make simultaneous translation, and therefore you can proceed. There's no problem.
Okay, so you've struck on the problem. It must be rectified. So that's the premise of our conversation. But then, okay, let me take us to what I know are systems issues. It's a system issue of improvement, again, by recollection of what had been done previously. In the time of the administration of Minister of Health, Chepoi, he made certain that there was a coordinator present in the hospital, of select hospitals, that we knew would have brain dead patients with devastating brain injury, fulfilling the criteria of death by an absence of brain function. And the appointment and support financially of coordinators in these selected hospitals made the difference of being aware of the potential of donors, So let me say to you, it is a matter of a system, and I know of this through a worldwide experience, brain death criteria, dead by neurologic criteria. In those hospitals, the patients are identified, and it is from there that there is a transition of an end-of-life care from death to donation to organ recovery to transplant. Certainly here in New England, we know the hospitals that have intensive care units with a high proportion of individuals that are determined to be dead by transplantation. Irinel, that requires a coordinator, and it requires the cooperation of critical care doctors. This is not a matter of transplantation issue anymore. It is the purview and responsibility of the critical care physicians in the intensive care unit. And the government has a responsibility to monitor the practices of the ICU in specific hospitals to know of the donor potential and then to know what has been realized of that potential. That is, how many patients are determined dead by neurologic criteria, how many patients are then presented to families for consent, what is the consent rate, but the critical care doctors are, in effect, the gatekeeper. They make Doral Sandesk, and his cooperation was essential in bringing this responsibility of the critical care doctor. In our experience of having visited Romania previously, we engaged the head or president of the critical care physician problem, and we know of the system that can make the improvement by our experience of having been in Romania to know of this. So of life care that would present an opportunity of organ donation to families at the time of a loved one's demise. So thank you for your patience in hearing that out. But I think it's the essential conversation. We know the problem. The government must be engaged. They must accept this as a responsibility of a government, not to abdicate that responsibility for patients then to have to find organs in some other country, either in the Balkans or some other country in the world. And then the system has to be in place, a coordinator and an engaged critical care doctor. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank. But, okay, so there are two pillars, I would say, in organ donation, both very important. You started with this one of the hospitals, of the importance of the critical care, of the importance of the transplant coordinator, also of the so-called key donation person. Usually it's an anesthesiologist, could be a critical care doctor that you mentioned also. Those two persons have to work together, and this will for sure increase the number of donors. But let's switch to the other pillar, let's say, which is the rate of consent. Rate of consent, family consent, because we still have this law requiring family consent, in Romania was really high all along the years. It was somewhere between 75 and 80% rate of consent. So now, even this decrease recently up to 60, so we have the refusal rate around 40% now, which was never that high in Romania. And I would like to approach a phenomenon that you know better than anybody else, I would say. Because this syntagma was used and, was misused, I would say, here, and I would like to make some things very clear. And what I'm talking about is the so-called organ trafficking. Organ trafficking is a phenomenon which happens at the international level. You know, as I mentioned, better than anybody else, this phenomenon. And you were very instrumental in the Declaration of Istanbul regarding organ trafficking. So briefly, what is the real organ trafficking? Which are the areas of the world involved in this?
A fraud, deception of an individual to sell a kidney or to have a kidney removed without their full consent, without their...
Where does it stay? Romania reported and related to this phenomenon. These are very important issues that I would like to approach.
Okay, let's address the organ trafficking, and then let's address the situation in Romania. Mm-hmm. First, organ trafficking. By definition, it entails definition of organ trafficking to be a monetary transaction, the sale of an organ, buying and selling of organs, de facto becomes organ trafficking. Be getting into, there can be an abduction. The means of this is malevolent. And the Council of Europe, importantly, has made it is happening worldwide. It happens in countries such as India, Egypt, in the Middle East. It has happened in China, in the Philippines, in Sri Lanka. We know of countries in which the only way to obtain an organ is really truly to buy it. And the Council of Europe has made a very important proclamation that organ sales are to be prohibited. The only approach, and are now increasing deceased donation greatly in two particular cities, Shiraz and Tehran, that has the world that sanctions the sale of organs is Iran. And even there, in the more recent years, our Iranian colleagues taken Iran out of the category of the worst in the world to now trying to make a great improvement. So organ trafficking, in effect, becomes an organ sale. And someone is victimized. They are in desperate need. It's a poor person that now has a kidney removed for the objective of obtaining some money. And usually, as has been the experience, the money isn't delivered, not enough money is given. There's a deception about what may ultimately be obtained and the amount of money that then brings this to the government's attention. And it's happened in India and Sri Lanka. I can just a notable place in Egypt, where doctors were very much involved in university hospitals in Cairo in having people sell their organs. Migrants have been the victims trying to get into Europe and selling their kidneys in Lebanon and in the border of Turkey and again in Cairo. That's the organ trafficking piece. There's another element that I think is consequential in Romania. Highly noteworthy individuals may have an advantage in obtaining a deceased donor organ over another individual. It's an issue that you brought to attention in our recent conversations and in our correspondence. And that is, there's a perception by people within Romania, because of their notoriety, their societal status, they've acquired fame, and there's this perception that they have an advantage over the common Romanian person to get an organ. That's another issue of importance when reflecting upon the consent rate. I would say today that most people know another individual that's in need of an organ transplant. And if the patients of Romania are not going to have the consent and the voluntarism, the donation of the Romanian people, then they're not going to be able to get organ transplants. This was an issue that we've faced in a country such as Israel. The same we're now facing in China. The people of China must come forward to donate, and that's happening. This year, we'll have over 6,000 donors in China. The people are coming forward in China to donate. They know others that are now on the list. Similarly, in Romania, I'm sure it would be the same. Patients are now known within family, within friends, within the workplace, in need of organ transplants. And the national agency must make, again, a very important promulgation of the importance of being a donor. And so I would say we've defined organ trafficking, it's a monetary sale. It's illegal in Romania. And yet Romanians may have to go off to another country to buy an organ because there's an inadequate number of organs available in Romania. The second piece, it's a matter of trust. The people of Romania must trust the system that organs are being equitably distributed. And the agency has to come forward and make that proclamation with assurance that this is now happening. Those are my suggestions.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, first of all, as you mentioned, we should divide into actually the idea of fairness in organ transplantation. One part is this the so-called organ trafficking, which is a phenomenon that does really exist in certain areas of the world. But again, I'd like to have your approval. As far as I know, Romania was never mentioned in related. That is not part or is not mentioned ever related to this phenomenon of organ trafficking around the world. So just to dismiss this idea and then to analyze the other one.
So to concur exactly with what you said, in our previous visits, we never encountered circumstances where we had become aware of the buying and selling of organs in Romania.
Okay.
So I have to say to you, I agree completely. And I don't think that should be I don't think that's the concern. I'm sorry, that's gracious. It's that phone going off. Hold on. Forgive me, Erinal. Just hold on. You know,
yeah, that's okay.
Helen, one second. I'm on a phone call with Romania. Let me call you back in just a few minutes. Thank you for your patience.
Sure.
Bye. No, that's not been the concern. I think the issue is that you struck on earlier. It's a trust in the system that the organs are being equitably distributed.
Okay.
But it's also an important element here. You've got to promote organ donation in the country to say, look, your countryman, your family member, right? You know very well that organs are needed. Why should there be any refusal these days? There shouldn't be. And we need to improve the consent rate greatly so that organs can be available for transplantation. So I wish to stress what you pointed out to the people who are listening in our conversation now. I am unaware of Romania being a location of organ trafficking. There have been other places in the Balkans, yes, but not in Romania.